Let's bring in Senator Robert Menendez, a member of the Committee on Foreign Relations, to talk about that. Thank you so much for being with us, sir. Really appreciate talking to you again. You heard Governor Kaine with the 9/11 Commission describing this as an extraordinary event. Would you agree?
Well, it is extraordinary, but by the same token, this is why I have targeted Iran and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and the division that was supposedly trying to carry this out in the sanctions legislation that is law, and in the new sanctions legislation that I've sponsored that has 76 bipartisan sponsors in the United States Senate to consolidate our sanctions law, because the Iranians are known to export terrorism, and they're in a regional fight from Sunni-controlled Saudi Arabia versus Shiite-controlled Iran. And so, and in that sphere of influence, they see Saudi Arabia as a major challenge to them. And so think of the Machiavellianism of taking out the Saudi ambassador here in the United States, and the conflict in the first instance that might have created for the United States in that part of the Arab world. So I think it's an amazing plot, but nonetheless, the Iranians have shown their propensity to export terrorism.
How fully have you been briefed at this point, Senator?
Well, we've had a series of briefings, but largely in the public sphere. We've asked for, the intelligence briefings that follow on here from both Justice and the other entities to get a full sense of what's happened. But I have to commend the, law enforcement and intelligence agencies here, because in essence, we prevented what would have been a plot that was unfolding from ever actually being anywhere near from taking place. But obviously there was a desire. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard is at the highest levels of the Iranian government. They operate so much of Iran's not only military elements, but also its economic elements.
Yes.
So for them to be involved here clearly shows that this was among the highest levels.
And let me just ask you, Peter King was just describing this, if it is at the highest levels as an act of war. Would you agree with that assessment? And if so, does it mean that military action needs to be on the table?
Well, obviously it didn't take place, and this was interceded. I'm not sure that we're talking about a full engagement in an act of war, but what it does allow us to do is two things that we should be doing immediately. Going to the United Nations and now getting the Chinese and others to finally engage in the full enforcement of the sanctions that the UN has passed against Iran, against its nuclear weapon desires. And secondly, it should be moving our legislation now in the Congress so that we can close those loopholes that exist in the sanctions legislation and tighten the noose.
Well, I know you and I have worked on that before in prior stories about those loopholes, which are amazing that they do still exist. But let me just ask you this: do you think that this is possible? Jamie Rubin was bringing this idea up that China, which is the biggest buyer of Iranian crude and provider of their foreign currency and really driving their economy, could this force China to pick between two huge crude oil suppliers, Saudi Arabia and Iran, and end up really isolating Iran?
I think it's a tremendous opportunity for the United States and the world to create that type of pressure. And I think it's a great opportunity for the Saudis, who were clearly the first instance of who was going to be attacked here, to their ambassador, to be part of making that case as well. And I think we have an opportunity here to change the dynamics and close those backdoor channels that have been open to Iran, particularly in refined petroleum products that they desperately need, and their financial institutions as well.
All right. Well, Senator Menendez, thank you very much for being with us. We appreciate it. Senator Menendez, of course, working to close some of the legislation that allows for loopholes for American company subsidiaries which operate in Iran, and also a longtime proponent of more curtailment of Iran's nuclear program.